Commissioner, over to you, or just finishing the duties part which you left incomplete. Thank you very much. Children to school at primary education level. And then, of course, there's this huge bulge of young people who finish primary and are headed to secondary. Are we prepared for it? In many cases, definitely we are not. But we need to deal with it. What are we going to do about it? Education is a human right. As Africans have said in their continental strategies, that completion of secondary is the minimum that every child must get. How are we going to make it possible in spite of all the challenges? So in the next session, we're going to look at examples of what's being done. We'll also hear about a study that has been done so that we begin to understand the scenario in order that we can address it. So in order to take this up, I'd like to call on the following to come and take their seats up here. Rapporteur, just inside it, where you are rapporteuring from somewhere? Yeah. Okay. We'll have a keynote address from Sizwe Zasana, Head of Strategy Learning. I think we must include language with STEM. When we talk of STEM, we should also include language. Okay, that is Sizwe. You'll help us pronounce your name. Please take a seat. Kimberly Kerr, Director for Regional Programs, Mastercard Foundation. Please take your seat. And we will have a ministerial roundtable. I'd like to request Honorable Ministers to come forward so that once we start to just keep going. Honorable Angelina Museka, Minister for Basic Education, South Africa. Honorable Mohamed Sanusi from Niger, Minister for Secondary Education. Please come forward and take a seat. Honorable Emily Okunji, Dodo, Minister ICT and Telecommunications, DRC. Minister for ICT and Telecommunications from DRC. And Honorable Jesus Batista, Secretary of State, Tibet, Angola. Come forward. Who's missing a seat? DRC? Okay, please come and take a seat. Angola will use the Who's missing? Angola. Okay, perhaps what we will do, Angola, please take your seat where you are. We'll have the opening presentations and then the presenters. Please, I will request you to go back to your seat so that the ministers can come and sit up here. Okay, so we're going to get the speech, the keynote address on future skills in the context of changing nature of work. And tell us how your name is pronounced so that we try and not misunderstand.
Thanks very much, Program Director of this particular session. My name is Sizwe Nasana. I know a lot of people, including in this country, can't do the clicks. During the break, you and I can talk, and I can give you a crash course on how to say Nasana. It really is a pleasure and privilege for me to be here. It's a little bit awkward for me to speak with my back against my ministers. So, I will sort of stand a bit sideways so that I don't have my back against Kimberly, the rapporteur, Beatrice, and our ministers here. And maybe just a quick introduction. I am the chairperson of the National Education Collaboration Trust. This is a structure which was formed actually by our minister here in South Africa, Minister Angie Motshekga, 5 years ago, which brings together business, labor, and civil society to work with government to improve the quality and relevance of education in South Africa. And it's a structure, and I'll talk a little bit about it a little bit later on. And maybe just so you understand a little bit about where I come from, I was previously the CEO of the largest bank in this country, First Rand, which includes FNB and RMB and West Bank. And when I retired from corporate life, having worked in telecoms and so on before, I decided that I was going to be in education. And today, I'm also a school teacher. In fact, this afternoon, when I finish here, I have a class at 2:30, so I will not be able to join. I will not be able to join the plenaries and the sessions later on because I have grade 10s that I'm teaching later this afternoon. I did skip some class, so other teachers who covered for me this morning. So I'm actually a school teacher these days. The presentation which I'm going to give is about the topic of today. And the introduction that was made by our president as well as our Minister Angie Motshekga this morning, as well as the speakers from AU, sort of lay the ground. And I'd like to take this opportunity to just acknowledge the ministers, the deputy ministers, the ADEA Executive Secretary, the members of the Diplomatic Corps, the Directors General, as well as Secretaries General that are here today, the senior officials from various countries, including representatives from the African Union, the African Development Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, the CEO of the MasterCard Foundation. I see very senior representatives from the MasterCard Foundation who are here today. All the esteemed ladies and gentlemen who are here, all protocol observed, I greet you here from South Africa. So we all know the challenges that the continent faces, especially when it comes to the Human Capital Development Index, where we still rank quite lowly as a continent. And the question really that we've got to ask ourselves is, how are we going to address this? And I'll share some thoughts with you. I'll share some thoughts with you during my presentation. Some of the things that I really believe are important. Now, everybody talks about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and I'm pleased to see the commissioners of 4IR from South Africa sitting at the table there. If you look at a lot of countries in the continent, especially those that are whose economies are still growing, you will see that an assessment which was done a couple of years ago around the critical thinking skills shows that the level of critical thinking skills or foundational skills in education in a lot of our countries are still relatively low. If you compare this with countries that are more endowed and maybe the first world countries, you'll see that the education systems has moved quite ahead in terms of the development of critical thinking skills and integrating those with the curriculum in the education system. We all know that these days, especially in the context of where the world is going, not only with the fourth industrial revolution, but also with the fifth industrial revolution that is also already upon us. Young people need to possess a whole range of skills in addition to the academic and technical skills which they've got to have. They've got to have collaboration skills, critical thinking, creativity, the ability to work with others, as well as, at the same time, the competencies that go beyond just the curriculum and the pedagogy which they get exposed to. And the question really that us, especially in the African continent, is going to face is, are we going to follow a sequential path that addresses the issues of access, and then quality, and then relevance in that sequential order? And my argument is that if we do that, our young people will be left behind forever. Because we can't simply just follow the sequential process of addressing the issue of access and then quality and relevance. If you look at our country here in South Africa, we're in a very privileged position in that about 25 years ago, only about 70% of school-going age children had access to education. Today, 100% of our school-going age children have access to education, and to improve access, about 80% of those young people have access to free education. In other words, parents don't pay fees, school fees, for their children to go to school. It's only about 20% that actually pay fees. So we've addressed the issue of access, and of course, right now we are addressing the issue of quality that we continue to address, as well as the issue of relevance of our curriculum. Just this year, the Department of Basic Education, and thanks to the Minister and the department officials, are introducing three-stream curriculum, because the curriculum that we've had has been an academic curriculum, almost 100% academic, and this year there's a vocational curriculum that's been introduced alongside a technical curriculum, which is more an ICT curriculum as well. So it's quite important that as a country we're moving to introduce this issue of relevance, because if you look at the skills and the competencies that our young people need, not only do we need knowledge, and typically the education system has been about imparting knowledge. We teach mathematics, we teach science, geography, languages and so on. But it is also, at the same time, important that we are developing and passing on the competencies that our young people need, as well as the skills that our young people need, because that's what's going to stand them in good stead, especially in the context of where we are, where we know that in the next 10 years, for instance, more than 60% of the jobs that are going to be done by these young people have not even been invented yet. So the issue is, you can't just impart knowledge. We've got to have all the skills so that these young people can navigate the fast-changing digital world in which we live. And at the current pace, where a lot of countries are still just focusing on the knowledge piece and not on the competency piece, it means that the gaps that exist between the rich world and the poor world, or the developing world, will simply continue to grow. And it is estimated here, just quoting from the recent studies, which show that it will take us decades to catch up if we're not addressing the issue of competencies and skills. The big challenge that we face this challenge even in this country, is that our whole system is still based on a certification system. So you come to South Africa, we have, for instance, the National Qualification Framework. From grade 1 to grade 10, you go up to National Qualification Framework that goes up to, say, NQ4 if you're passing matric, as an example. And then at the doctoral level, you go up to postdoc at National Qualification Level 10, as an example. The challenge with this certification-based approach of how we've looked at ourselves in terms of assessing progression is that the system does not actually measure the competencies or the skills at all. So that means that someone can hold a certificate, but that certificate does not actually show, does not even tell you anything about the competencies that they have, including the very foundational competencies that are required. For instance, can they count? Can they read? Can they add? Can they subtract? Can they use a computer? Can they stand in front of people and present? The certificates don't actually tell you any of that. So our country here in South Africa has now started the process of integrating the qualification framework that we have in our system with a competency framework, which makes sure that at the end of the day, the teachers, for starters, who are teaching these young people have the competencies as well as the skills that they are supposed to impart. And just talking about that, we all know that there cannot be quality education or relevant education without teachers. Teachers are agents, they're the ones who deliver curriculum, they're the ones who articulate curriculum. And as a school teacher, as I mentioned to you earlier, one of the things in our schools that we do is when we recruit teachers, we ask teachers to put their rubrics, all the stuff that they use, including taxonomies and so on that they use in the classroom, put that aside. And let's just talk about a problem that a teacher has ever solved ever since they were an adult. In fact, from when they were young. Just let's talk about a practical example of a real problem that a teacher has ever solved. And it's amazing that very often teachers want to bring you, for instance, their lesson plans. They want to bring you the stuff that they do in the classroom. And those teachers may even be the best teachers that you've come across. In other words, they will be producing straight A's in particular subjects, especially if it's subjects such as mathematics or science and so on. But when it comes to thinking outside the box, put the lesson plans one side and let's just talk about how you solve problems. Let's talk about, as a teacher, how you communicate, whether your communication skills are effective. Let's talk about how creative you are as a teacher, which are all these skills that we expect teachers to impart, but very often teachers do not possess these skills themselves. So when we talk about continuing professional teacher education as an example, no longer can we just have teachers improve their technical subject knowledge and content. At the same time, teachers must have these skills that we expect them to impart amongst our young people. And the major problem that we have here is that teacher training colleges and universities, the faculties of education themselves, have not even begun teaching these skills or developing these skills amongst teachers or would-be teachers that are in initial teacher education. I talk to a lot of universities in this country. In fact, even this coming Wednesday, we're hosting 5 universities at our school because we have adopted inquiry-based learning, project-based learning. And a lot of universities simply don't know what that means. They don't know what it is. They don't know how to do integrated teaching. They don't know how to develop these skills of communication. You have faculties that operate in silos. For instance, the faculty of education doesn't talk to even the faculty of humanities, let alone the faculty of science and engineering. And yet, these are people that you expect are going to impart skills to the young people. So initial teacher education has to fundamentally change if the teachers are going to impart these skills that you expect as part of the 4th Industrial Revolution. But not only that, we also need to think very differently about who gets attracted to teaching. Because very often we had people who may have wanted to become doctors, who may have wanted to become lawyers, and maybe they didn't have enough marks to get into those faculties, and they end up in teaching. That's why I've taken it about myself as a person who's been extremely privileged to get back into the classroom, to show that we need people who have the skills, we need the brightest to actually end up in the classroom. So we've got to think very differently about curriculum. These days, if you think about, for instance, the African continent, there are many things, and I'll talk about the issue of language just now. In our schools, we've introduced a lot of modern themes that are intended to develop leadership from young people already. Whilst at the same time we're teaching the technical aspects of the curriculum, it's important to also teach things like diversity, like resilience, like entrepreneurship and leadership and so on. The problem though, I mean, we found this problem in our schools, is that because we have a standard curriculum and we follow the CAPS curriculum in this country, if you're going to add all of these things, not as extramural subjects, but as things that are actually have to be done by all students, it simply just extends the school day. So the school day is becoming a lot longer because there are a lot of things that are part of the curriculum, including some of the modern things that are really important to be covered in the curriculum. So we have this challenge that the amount of time for children to do extramural activities like cultural activities or sporting activities and so on has become less, because in our senior phase, as an example, we have 12 learning areas compared to that all students must do, compared to typically about 7 or 8. So that means, you know, our teachers are really overworked because a lot of these things are not optional. In other words, you don't do electives that I may decide to do computing or not. Everybody must do computing. Everybody must do mathematics. Everybody must do robotics, because we believe that these subjects are really, really important. It's like, you know, if you're learning to speak, you must learn not just how to use a laptop or a tablet. You must learn how to make it work, create applications and things that are going to make sure that, you know, these young people have all the necessary skills. One of the major issues that as an African continent we've got to address is the language issue. So we have about 1,500 languages in the continent, but if you look at it, in a population of the continent of about almost 1.2 billion people, I don't know if a lot of you know this, there are only about 44.5 million people who are first language English, French, or Portuguese speakers in the continent. But the language of learning and teaching in a classroom is French, English, or Portuguese. And you can imagine the amount of time that is spent just negotiating meaning, because the teacher who's teaching the subject is not a first language English, French, or Portuguese speaker. The students that they're teaching are not first language English, French, or Portuguese speakers. So the amount of time they just wasted, time to understand abstract concepts, is a major issue. So this is one thing that the continent has to address. There are a number of things that various countries are doing already in this country. We've introduced Kiswahili as an example. We have 11 official languages, which makes it complicated. But already, you know, we're moving forward, and we have countries like Nigeria, for instance, you know, that are now, you know, using some of the major languages in that country as languages of learning and teaching. In Senegal, they're doing the same. In the Francophone countries, in Mozambique, you know, they're doing the same, where they're encouraging the development of indigenous languages as languages of learning and teaching. But not only should we stop there, because unless our indigenous languages are also commercial languages, there's no reason why parents would want their children to learn them, because you can't transact in them. You know, that's why if you look at this country as an example, you know, Afrikaans, which is a relatively young language, is a language of not only learning and teaching, it's also a commercial language. When we started in our schools, we said we're not going to teach Afrikaans, but parents were up in arms. No, they want Afrikaans because Afrikaans puts bread on the table. And yet Afrikaans, as I was saying earlier, is a very young language. So we have to address this issue of language. And very often when you look at the continent, the resources that are allocated to indigenous languages are just simply not enough to develop our languages as languages of learning and teaching. And there are ways, especially using technology today, that you can develop our languages. For instance, we now have technologies about language recognition, we have artificial intelligence. Obviously, we need to develop terminologies and lexicology so that we're able to teach in some of our indigenous language. But this is one of the fundamental things that's going to enable our young people to read. That's going to enable investment to be made in, for instance, books, in literature, in trade books, in indigenous languages, which will improve the quality of learning in the classroom. And of course, technology is upon us, whether we like it or not. And therefore, the adoption of technologies in the classroom is one of the important things that we're going to do. However, technologies are not going to replace teachers in the classroom. You know, if you are in the further education and training phase, maybe you can start to use a lot more technology. At the end of the day, teachers still need to be in the classroom teaching our children. And of course, integrating technology using blended learning, solutions and so on as they do so. But, it is important. And very often, you find that companies that are in education technology are not companies that actually know what happens in a classroom. And you have a lot of these shiny and nice technologies and applications that are developed, but a lot of them are actually not effective in the classroom. Why? Because they're not developed by the users, by the teachers and the students or learners who use these technologies in the classroom. It's very pleasing when you look at the continent to see that there's been, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, a significant increase in technologies that are used in the classroom, especially if you look at the darker blue areas that are shown on the map here. In Southern Africa, East Africa, West Africa, we're seeing quite a significant increase in technologies that are used in the classroom. But we've got to make sure that where technologies are being developed, they are meant to particularly benefit the learners that are marginalized. And it's pleasing when you look at the statistics that increasingly the number of technologies that are benefiting the marginalized, because unless we do this, it means that our marginalized people will forever be left behind. What do we need to overhaul and really run and make sure that there's a revolution in education in the continent? I think the structure such as the National Education Collaboration Trust, which has been created here in South Africa, which brings business, labor to work with government, is an example of what can be achieved to bring different thinking into the landscape